engagement. I'll tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. I lived in Toronto for about 8 years, worked in the design consulting sort of space for about 3 or 4. Prior to that, I worked as a professional musician, also in frontline mental health work here in Toronto and in Vancouver, including at the supervised injection site in Vancouver, which I'm happy to say seems to no longer be in danger of being closed down. Speaking of health initiatives. And I spent last year living in Denmark doing the sort of master's level design program at the Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design. And it was during my final project there that I sort of fell into this story that I seem to be spinning around in, involving SMS chatbot-specific engagement. And I'm going to put a big proviso on this and say that I've been playing around in this space for a few months, and then there's, I'm sure, a bunch of people here who are much more expert on this, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. So my purpose here, I'm going to try to spend about half my time talking about some of the projects I've been doing or am doing, and then I'm just going to open up at the end some of the more speculative questions that I haven't really had a chance to entertain lately. And I'm hoping that some of you guys might find those interesting, and then we can talk about them and about them. So without further ado, I mentioned I was doing a graduate program last year in Denmark, and for my final project, I knew I wanted to look kind of at the intersection of smart cities, artificial intelligence, and civic engagement. And I really wanted to disrupt some of the narrative around smart cities that I felt I was immersed in, which was kind of a lot of IoT bling, a lot of big, heavy infrastructure this, and I really like this quote that I came across. I literally had it on the wall in front of me for several months while I worked on my project. Yeah, I think it kind of says it all. There was somebody from GE in the room during my presentation, so I gave confetti treatment about the flames of whatever. And so, when we talk about inequalities, of course, we can be talking about things like the largest forced migration crisis since World War II, or we can be talking about more kind of casual, invisible racism in our midst, like I found in the case in Denmark of the Greenlandic Inuit people who are part of that society, but not always really part of that society. So that's the community I chose to work with for my final project. Unfortunately, I don't have much time to really tell you very much about it, but let's just say there's a bit of a double-edged thing where they have Danish passports, and it's essentially it would be racial profiling for the state to single them out for special support and services when they move to mainland Denmark, despite the fact that, it's basically like, if somebody from, an Inuit person from the north who'd never been to Toronto sort of flew into Toronto, and you would imagine they would probably want some special supports and services. It's that sort of situation there. And I think the statement from a government official really kind of summed it up. Like, if only there was a way that we could reach out to these people that was kind of more flexible, that was more nuanced, kind of what if. I was recently in Helsinki presenting at the Interaction Design Conference, this SMS chatbot concept. I did some research around refugee services there, and again saw similar but different patterns around just not knowing how the system can really connect with people, and there's not really a way to kind of train it. And a dominant theme across the projects I've been investigating so far is language barriers in government services, and then who's left out, who's marginalized, who's kind of on the outside of that. In Helsinki, I heard from people I spoke to, that really Finnish and English are not going to be able to meet the needs of asylum seekers who are arriving in that city. Sorry, I guess I should mention right now I'm doing a project with Citizenship, Immigration, Refugees Canada to develop prototype an SMS-based service for Syrian newcomers in Canada. So language is definitely on the table for that one too. So anyway, this research kind of gave to this idea, what if you could just text this via question? And so for my final project in Denmark, I prototyped this service, which I called SMS, which means welcome. And the idea was to provide a SMS-based service that could connect them with resources, both of the formal variety, but also serving as a kind of connective tissue to connect people to experience within their own community. So try to move quickly through this, but the idea was kind of taking this kind of neat sort of web of services and then trying to look at how it actually functions, which is that it's dispersed, it's scattered. It's very challenging to navigate, even if you speak Danish, and of course in this case, you have people who don't. And as throughout these projects, I think this has been a principle that I think has found a lot of traction with the people I've spoken to, is that we're not proposing something that replaces human beings in a sort of service ecosystem, but rather something that at least is more than a form, something that can, whether it's through sort of intelligence or just through being able to be more computationally flexible or accessible, we can do better than this is kind of the goal. So just to give you some, I guess, human context from my research in Denmark, the people I spoke to, there were many insights, but one of the big ones was that you can't search for something if you don't have a mental model that it exists. So this woman, Guborg, she had Petra in this case, she had a really good job in Greenland and was well educated, but she never had to access housing services. So when she was kind of at her lowest point in Denmark and was homeless and living on the street, she had no idea that there was such thing as housing services that were available to her. And it was only through a chance encounter with a friend that she got kind of onto this kind of upward slope of getting access to those services. So all the search engines in the world couldn't have really helped her out in this case because she didn't have a model for the services that were out there. And of course, the government services are not mapped to human needs and behavior. So I apologize, I'm moving pretty quickly through this, but hopefully we can chat first. So part of my prototyping, I actually started off using artificial intelligence markup language to try to make some functional chatbot services. That took me so far, and then I ran into lots of fun stuff. So I don't know if there's anybody here who's familiar with AI ML, but we should talk and I can learn. So I moved on to actually a much simpler platform, TextIt, which is based on a open source United Nations project called RapidPro. And that, as you can kind of see here, allows you to build relatively simple but quite flexible flows that you can deliver SMS-based services through. It's really interesting, and yeah, I'd be happy to kind of sit down and kind of jam on it at length. So I was able to use this to develop a functional prototype there. I was able to throw together one during this conference in Helsinki in kind of a matter of hours. I think it's a really exciting platform. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but yeah, really worth looking into if you're interested in this space. So just to give you a slightly more granular look at what some of these flows could look like, my hypothesis was that we could offer people a lot more, again, in that form, without creating anything that actually resembled artificial intelligence. So just by being able to use sort of a conversational kind of branching path, do some triage, we can understand maybe where somebody was at in their journey. Were they somebody who was actually doing really well and could perhaps become sort of self-select as a mentor for other people? Or were they someone for whom kind of all the red flags were there, that they needed priority supports right now if they weren't going to get themselves into a lot more trouble? So I was trying to just kind of map out how, with again, relatively simple technology, we could support people much better than what they were receiving at that time. So yeah, just kind of a mock-up of one of the flows I was sort of testing out using sort of keyword detection. Apologies, maybe small type in the back. But, so yeah, again, kind of trying to use that sort of triage to determine what are the priority needs for the person. And then being able to, my idea was that within a matter of a few texts, could we give you that connection to a human that's much more immediate and direct than what you would get from browsing on a website, for instance. So here, there's a resource center for you. It's open now. You can go there, or you can call them. Do you want to see the address? These are quite simple things to do with SMS or MMS sort of platforms. Okay. So I was going to play a little interview snippet, but I think in the interest of time, I will just dive into the second half, which was hello and welcome. So as I mentioned, this project in Denmark, and right now working with the government. It's any of you know who've actually worked. If you work on projects with, say, the government, you have to shelve a lot of the really fun ideas, and that's great because frankly, I'd never get anything built that anybody could use. But I wanted to just I kind of rummage through my sort of junk drawer of things that I was really excited about when I started this project back in October in Denmark, and I thought I'd just sort of dump them out there, kind of toy box, and maybe some of you want to pick up on them or talk about them. So in the kind of landscape research I did, this is a really hot topic right now. SMS, chatbots, bots are really popular, and there's a lot of interest, and a lot of interest in how they can be used in frivolous applications. Some services that I documented, these aren't necessarily specifically chatbots, but and I could already add, I think, a bunch more to the list, but these are worth kind of jotting down and having a look at. I had some fun just kind of like thinking about what would be sort of taxonomies of bots in a near or present future. But again, these are more kind of like notes from my process last year. I'd love to talk to you guys about what you see there as being. I'm kind of interested in stuff that sort of both just at the extremes, but like kind of where the sort of middle is of like kind of really like mature technologies. And I had some fun thinking of sort of speculative scenarios for kind of, again, sort of what sort of near future kind of world of connected services could look like. Whoa, that's oh my god. Okay, a man walks into a development permit zone. A bot queries him. Are you interested in learning more about this proposal or discussing it with others? Could be a nice alternative to the like tiny little sort of development here sign. A city planner needs more granular data about people's perspective on an issue. Release the bots. So instead of relying on, say, a once-a-year survey that maybe has a response rate of that, and people can only answer the questions as they're presented to them, what if you could? I'm really genuinely curious. Is there any kind of role for maybe statistically unclean but qualitatively much more rich data that might emerge from a conversational engagement? So imagine you get a text from something that says, "Hey, I'm from the city. I'd like to talk to you about this issue," and your conversation could branch, and that sort of branching stuff wouldn't get lost. It doesn't necessarily fall off the map. It goes back to someone, and this could happen. The sort of cycle of this could be, you could imagine happening on a sort of rolling basis. Like, how would that change the landscape of planning and engagement? Flipping the pyramid, what if we have toolkits so that people can actually create bots to map more accurate data? So for instance, if there is, maybe your government isn't doing such a great job at representing the role of this cultural group in a neighborhood, like what if we had the ability to kind of create ad hoc services that could provide more statistical information or more kind of nuanced things around hyper-local data around the activities in a neighborhood. I think the whole kind of citizen bot toolkit thing is an interesting thing. I did actually document a few examples of stuff like that. So, and then I guess in all of this, like what happens when bots start talking to bots? Like what are the kind of the cascades of things that can propagate through a system when you have sort of agents that might be initiated by someone or beholden to someone or created by someone, but one of these sort of network actors can talk to each other. What does that look like? And then just some of the big questions. I think these are a little more grounded in my present right now for the project I'm doing with the government. But you know, what sort of voice will people respond to in a service like this? You know, what is creepy? This I should have that in mind. Giant type. And I mean, I think I have this like so ongoing hypothesis that a conversational approach could lead to different kinds of information surfacing in these sorts of interactions. But really, I'm just starting to explore that, and I'm willing to have those assumptions kind of knocked on flat in their backs too. So, and back to my sort of civic planning proposal. I have this idea that it might be desirable to have more information from some of the people some of the time, but I don't know how that actually plays out in practice. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's that, and I don't know. Sorry, I didn't blow through the budget.
It's good. Thanks. Other questions? Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned one of the issues that's with the current system right now is that, like, for example, with the service, home service, or finding out about services, if say you were homeless, that like people had trouble because that just wasn't a mental health. It wasn't something that existed, right? So if this were to be implemented, how would someone find out about this particular service?
Yeah. So one of my colleagues from last year was kind of working on, we were sort of sister projects, kind of SMS-based projects. He was actually at the time working on a project, a service for refugees entering into Denmark. And I'll just borrow from his, give him full credit. But his prototype involved like giving refugees who are arriving at a train station in Denmark, giving them a prepaid SIM card, prepaid SIM card with his service kind of preloaded on it. So just you put in the card and you get a text from the service immediately. And I think the discovery part, of course, it can't always be that straightforward. But I mean, as full disclosure, I think in our report to the government for the project we're doing, probably we will be proposing that it's worth your while to just get this service into people's hands, and if you're delivering it through text messages, a logical way to do that is to be giving people SIMs when they arrive. But beyond that scenario, yeah, I guess it's a matter, for the project we're doing, I think outreach through the groups that we're partnering with, it's very kind of symbiotic. The service isn't really containing information, it's more of a bridge. So we would probably be looking to work directly with the organizations who are going to be providing the volunteers who actually are the information channels to publicize it and engage people. But yeah, is that?
Yes.
I think Casey, yeah.
Idea that popped in my head that will be followed by a question that relates. So one of the things that the Welcome Home to Refugee Support Group has identified is in Syria or in Turkey or Lebanon, wherever the camps are, as refugees are finding out the transit destination or wherever they're going, they're using their phones to find information that may or may not be accurate. So way down the road, Canada could be providing information directly to those in the camps to make sure that experience starts at the outset, which leads into the question. You've got a contract, you've got a one-off deal with contract with government. Do you get any sense that it's a thing that they're going to do and they're pushing beyond? Is there, let's take a look at data and explore how we can implement it across ministries, how do we take that and actually seed it? Because I think that's the question is emerging a lot. Is if government's trying to do innovative one-offs, can they start building that into the culture? Do you see that?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, and what can I speak to so far? I would say it's been a really good engagement so far. The group we're working with does have like policy innovation in their title, so they are kind of an agency within an agency within a ministry within. So I think they're kind of self-described. They're the rebels, and they very much have the challenge of trying to upsell these ideas. So I'm lucky, and my client is very receptive, is very interested in this space, sees a lot of potential, sees the opportunity to scale it, and or deliver it elsewhere. And I'm hoping that I can help them to sell it up, because that's, I think, the challenge. But I will say, and we can talk about this more, of course, later, but it's been interesting seeing people not so much come out of the woodwork, but like really come up and approach us from other places in the government who are also interested in these kinds of kind of, what should we say, like accessible and kind of lower barrier technologies. So they're out there, they're distributed, and I think it's kind of trying to maybe help them have a bit of a banner or kind of tent that we can operate under might be good. So yeah, we looking forward to talking later. I think just in the back first.
Actually, related to your question, so putting my government hat on, I'm actually curious to know if privacy, like if you're collecting data, if privacy and data quality are some of the challenges that you would face in terms of the allocated information that you collect.
Yeah, we're. I think that this is going to be such a cop out, but I think that is kind of a bridge we haven't quite crossed. Right now, for our project, I think we have the idea of the service, but our kind of real mandate right now is just to be exploring more with people who would be the end beneficiaries, direct beneficiaries, how they actually just feel about this technology and that kind of engagement on a more just visceral human level. So really, we're trying to figure out if it's even appropriate to begin with. Having established that, then we would, of course, need to be looking at the harder questions around privacy and storage and that. But yeah, right now we're kind of actually trying to just validate whether this is something that people would use and whether it would be useful to them. And of course, I think the privacy issue is an integral part of that, but I think we're kind of kicking that question down the road just a little bit. So, sorry, not the most satisfying answer.
So just a really basic general question. I'm trying to comprehend how to integrate what you're saying with what you're doing. And so is it your judgment that this technology that you're exploring has come along enough so that volunteer projects of the sort that we're engaged in could benefit from them or could consider actually integrating some of this technology with their own project, such as the Welcome Project? I've got the Toronto Budget Project, which involved discovery. You seem to be presenting it as a way, as a better option, really, for discovering information that might be available to help people. Is it realistic for us now to actually think about doing this, or are you just kind of giving us a peek into the future?
Well, I'm really, God, I wouldn't want to not qualified for future,
Well, I mean,
visioning,
AI is coming, that's established.
But I think, I think there's, so I'll say that for the project in Denmark, I had the luxury of not, really having to think too hard about feasibility, and so I was able to kind of say, a lot of the technology is there. This is not a pie in the sky idea. This could be done. Would it be feasible to build it for such a small, niche, relatively small population on that level of sort of artificial intelligence? Maybe it's more questionable. I think to try to answer your question, I think where we've gone with our current project is that we've actually thought that we're just going to kind of peel off most of the fancy AI kind of from the bus and just leave kind of more of a really thin kind of client service that would initially, there would be some automated parts that would try to just understand, who is talking to me. Are they a newcomer client? Okay, have I talked to them before? Get some basic demographic data, and then just try to basically take one question and then pass it out to a network of volunteers who would then receive just like a broadcast text message. So we're really kind of leaving it up to the humans in the system to answer the question. We think that seems like a good place to start because you can get that off the ground running right now with the human resources who are like the people who are currently active in volunteer efforts. And we think that could be a way of possibly training a more automated system in the future. But we're kind of looking at it in sort of slices, I guess, of development. So I don't know if that helps answer your question. I mean, I think from what I know of the project you guys are working on, it sounds like you've got some there's some overlap and then some, of course, some different aspects to it. But maybe if there were particular technologies or things that you were interested in, we could look at those more specifically.
Are you going to be hanging around for a year or two?
I don't know. It may depend how this goes. I should also, I should really have his name up here, but my project partner on this current project, Manu Kabahizi, is actually does have a really great track record of, I'm going to write his, I can't do it. Yeah, I should put his name up. But anyway, he has developed and implemented and shipped projects in this space for a number of years, so he's actually much better qualified to be up here than I am right now. But he'd be a great person to connect with too, particularly around anything around feasibility and implementation. He's an engineer.
Maybe one more.
Oh, yeah. Just like a general question. I'm wondering whether you actually consider the possibility that rather than having like people sort of like ask the questions per se, maybe like get a way of like sending an SMS that gives them like options in terms of like the top things that they would probably be interested in. Like let's just say like for refugees, to give an example, I'm pretty sure like there's probably like relatively small set of like things that they immediately kind of need for things. So I was wondering like maybe like if you provided like a location-based SMS that just sends them a bunch of options, and then they literally basically select which one they want, kind of thing, rather than having to like trying to go through the difficulty of trying to do like natural language processing and whatnot.
Yeah.
It will eventually come with AI.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I guess the short answer is yes. We're kind of looking at that too. My aforementioned colleague in Denmark, Cora, who's actually also actively developing a project for refugees in Denmark. He took much more of that sort of menu-based approach, and there's certainly some advantages, as you point out. Of course, the menu, you can sort of see the scope of the system. And then I think one challenge he ran into with that was it rapidly becomes, on a small screen, you rapidly run into challenges when you're sort of front-loading that information. So I think, I don't know if it's, I think there's probably some kind of balance between the two, allowing people to just, the possibility of expressing a need, that they don't have to map to an existing structure, but then also being proactive, I think, is something that, whether it's in the form of giving a menu, as you suggest, or triggering events at certain times. It's kind of, I guess, one of our things that we're looking at is, obviously, the settlement process is something that can take years, and there's so much information, but, what are the most important things within your first week, within your first month, within your first 3 months? And I think that a service like this could be, without a whole lot of effort, could be much more proactive about structuring when giving you the information you're more likely to be needing now than kind of, again,